Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my good friend Sofia Smallstorm returns to the show. Sofia discusses her recent research into glyphosate, which reveals a very dark and what appears to be an intentional plan by the controllers to leverage the herbicide to both depopulate and usher in the transhuman agenda. And so, without further ado, here's Sofia. Well, friends, we have another show with my very good friend, Sofia Smallstorm, and today we're going to talk about and discuss Sofia's June 2018 newsletter, which is very, very interesting. And we're going to talk about glyphosate. It's a lot worse than we have ever been told or led to believe. So I'll leave it at that, and then Sofia will get into it. But before we get into glyphosate, your newsletter, Sofia, kicks off with the Starbucks logo, and I found that to be very interesting as well. So did you want to talk about that to kick it off?
Yes, Mike. Thank you for having me on again. I'm very happy always to be on your show. The Starbucks logo, we all see that thing. And I used to pass it. There was always a red light there and I stopped at that red light and I look at this logo and I go, what is that? What is it? It seemed very ISIS-like, So you can see that it's this woman and she's got long wavy hair, and then there are these like fish parts, this scaly stuff. It's a circular logo, green and white. So I have a new contact here in San Diego, a friend, and he was explaining to me a few weeks ago that it's actually a mermaid with her legs, two legs. The tail is split, and the split tail is curling up around her. And the original logo, which was brown and white, that had this mermaid creature really, exposed with big bulging breasts and the split tail. And when the delivery trucks pass, because Starbucks used to sell coffee, coffee beans, I guess, or ground
Right.
coffee or some such thing. They weren't a restaurant type of place. They were a delivery service and purveyor of tea, spices, and coffee beans, right? And the public was sitting next to these delivery trucks with these giant boobs. Then there was some kind of outcry. And so the company owner at that time, I don't think that was the original founder, he said, okay, let's change it. So anyway, it's all detailed in my newsletter, but we can go into it a little more if you like.
Yeah, I found it very interesting because I went back and took a look at the old logo because I don't think the old logo, I think it's been out of play for a while now. But when I started reading your newsletter, I did recall the old logo. So I said, let me go take a look at it. So clearly, it's very sexually oriented. Like you said, she's got these boobs hanging out and the split tail, and she's holding her split tail back, basically like holding her legs back. So it's very provocative. I'll just leave it at that. So I don't know. After I read your newsletter and I took a look at the old logo, Sophia, I thought to myself, is there anything in this world that doesn't have something to do with sex? I don't know. It's just crazy.
Well, let me give the listeners some more details. So I looked up mermaid, siren, because mermaids are known for their allure, their sexual allure, and they sit on these rocks all draped with seaweed and their hair, draped over their bare chest. And they call out to sailors and they create a shipwreck because they are so alluring and enchanting, their cries or songs or whatever, that they bring these ships onto the rocks and the ships are shattered and everybody dies. So that's evil, bad, right?
Right.
And I learned that there is a form of mermaid with two tails called the Melusine, Melusine. And that's what's in the Starbucks logo, even today. Because those fish parts that encircle her, they've removed the crotch from the logo. And they've basically zoomed in on it and blown it up. And apparently the guy who designed it in 1971, who did the redesign, is a guy called Doug Fast, F-A-S-T. And he used to work for the ad agency in Seattle, Heckler Bauker. And he was the one put on the job to redesign the S-Bucks. That's how they used to refer to it in the industry, S-B-U-X. So the S-Bucks logo was designed by Doug Fast, redesigned. And at that time, the founders of Starbucks, who had been three friends from University of San Francisco, they had already turned it over to this new owner whose name was Howard. Let's see, what was his name? Howard Schultz. And they had themselves, the three original Starbucks founders, had turned to Alfred Peet's. We now know that as Peet's Coffee and Tea, and they were going to build up the Peet's chain, and so they gave their Starbucks chain to Howard Schultz. They sold it, and it was Schultz who redesigned the Starbucks logo. So the original brown was designed in 1971, and then this guy in 1992, that's who it was. Doug Fast did the 1992 version of the logo, the green and white one. So I gave you the wrong date in the beginning. But he says here, I did the green full siren logo with a stronger, simpler read for reproduction. In 1992, we had to blow up the siren to eliminate the spread, so-called suggestive tails. So that's the version you see today. I still have most of the original concept work for the creation of this logo in one of my big sketchbooks. To me at the time, it was just another logo job to do. Who would have thought I'd be sick of seeing it all over the place? It isn't even one of my best logos. So now I want to tell you about the name Starbucks. So we have to go back to the original owners, these three friends from the University of San Francisco. And they were going to name their coffee operation. They learned from Alfred Peet how to custom roast green coffee beans. Because in that time, the 70s, the 60s and 70s, what were Americans drinking? Do you remember what people drank for coffee?
Well, they were drinking instant coffee, right, like Sanka, and coffee out of the tins.
Right, Sanka was decaf, but yeah, they drank instant coffee out of jars, these weird granules that dissolved the instant you put boiling water on them. And they drank things like Maxwell House, remember that, in the cans?
Yeah.
This Alfred Peet, who was Dutch, he was the one to bring custom roasted coffee beans to America. And Starbucks began to do that, and they delivered that in trucks, and their brown and white Melusine logo with the spread legs and the big boobs, it said coffee, tea, spices. So at that time, there was also a best-selling book, Coffee, Tea, or Me, and it was about flight attendants. And I remember reading it. It was these, lascivious tales of the adventures of flight attendants in the air and the lecherous men who lured them into hotel rooms and did all these different adulterous things with them. Yeah. So to get back to the name, the original founders were going to name their operation, their coffee operation, I don't know how to say this, Pequod, which was the name of the whaling ship in Herman Melville's story, Moby Dick. And it's such a weird name. Somebody said at that time, well, you don't want people to say, I've drunk a cup of Pequod.
No, it's not catchy
It's
at all.
Terrible. Not catchy, not appealing. So then they chose the name of the first mate in the story, Moby Dick, whose name was Starbuck. So that's how it became Starbucks. And apparently the story goes that they had no interest in any other aspect of Herman Melville's story. But I'm here to say, excuse me, the story is about hunting the seas, the high seas, for a white sperm whale, an albino sperm whale called Moby Dick, who bit off Captain Ahab's leg. And therefore, excuse me, but you are looking for a sperm whale by the name of Moby Dick? Come on. And you have a siren with her legs spread, and she's asking for Moby Dick sperm. Right? Yes.
Oh my God. Yep. Yep. You've nailed it. Yeah. It's crazy. It really is. It just makes you wonder, like, when they put this stuff together, these logos and anyway, so I found that part of your newsletter to be enlightening and entertaining at the same time.
Well, somebody wrote to me and said he had thought there would be even darker content to the Starbucks logo. But oh, maybe there is. I do think it looks Masonic. But the fact that it's this worldwide sex quest, even in its current form, because all they've done is zoom up above the crotch, right? The whole
Right.
thing is still there. It's just out of sight.
Yeah, they cleaned it up a little bit, but the basic intent of the logo is still there.
Yeah. And now we're looking worldwide. Moby Dick's first mate.
Yeah.
There you go. And who is in a marriage? Who's the first mate? It's the wife.
Yeah.
So the way that I segued into glyphosate was that mermaids, even though they proliferate through the myths of many cultures, they are man-made creations. This whole world of man-made creations, GMOs, that is now the focus of my attention. GMOs, Roundup, and glyphosate. I had heard about glyphosate. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know, Mike, what I have learned in the last few weeks. And I'm actually quite stricken for humanity.
Yeah. As I mentioned when leading into the show, Sophia, it's really bad. So, yeah, tell us some more.
All right. So glyphosate was first synthesized or made or discovered in Switzerland in 1950 by a chemist. And it was not patented until 1974 when it was independently rediscovered, synthesized once again on the other side of the Atlantic by a Monsanto chemist called John Franz. And it was patented as an antibacterial, an antimicrobial. It was used also patented as a mineral chelator, a nutrient remover, and then as a toxic defoliant for the plant world. So it's an organophosphate. It is very similar to Agent Orange. That was a defoliant that they used in Vietnam. Remember, that has made a lot of people very sick. So here are some things that I didn't know about glyphosate, Roundup, and GMOs. Almost all GMO crops today are now Roundup ready, which means they're designed to be sprayed with Roundup. And 2 billion kilos of glyphosate, which is the main active agent in Roundup. There are others, and it is said, I believe correctly, that Roundup is actually more toxic than glyphosate by itself. But glyphosate is more insidious. As a standalone compound or molecule, glyphosate is the most prevalent toxin in the world today, and I'll be explaining why. So some 2 billion kilos of glyphosate are sold annually worldwide. Why? Because it came off patent. I read as early as 2000, and then somewhere else I learned 2007, and now anybody can make it. And China is the biggest producer. So 99.9% of glyphosate used throughout the world does not even touch a weed. It's known as an herbicide or weed killer. It doesn't go anywhere near a weed. It's not even just in our food or in plants. It's in rainwater and the air. And it's water soluble, which makes it extremely dangerous because that means it moves through the water content of all living things. Nature sequesters toxins in fat. Nature's toxins are fat soluble, so they don't get around as easily. But glyphosate is water soluble. And its arrival in the world of farming has been compared to the discovery of penicillin in the world of disease. I mean, this is how much it's celebrated.
Yeah, and going back to the level of contamination, Sophia, so we talked about watersheds in our previous show. So the watersheds also are contaminated, yes?
That's right. Watersheds are full of glyphosate because it's in the runoff, and especially in places like the Midwest, Mike, in places where there's a lot of agriculture and farming. So another use for glyphosate is desiccation, drying and shrinking of crops right before harvest. So farmers, even farmers who don't grow GMOs per se, will purchase glyphosate and spray it all over grain crops. They'll spray it on wheat, they'll spray it on oats, barley, rye. Rice gets sprayed with glyphosate because it starves the crops of water, it shrinks and dries them, they're easier to cut down, and you can fit more in the transport trucks.
Right. Yeah, it's extremely alarming. And one of the things, folks, that I got out of the newsletter, and I spoke to Sophia before we got started with the show, and Sophia will get into this, is that what you're going to hear, it's impossible in my mind to conclude that this was just all by mistake or happenstance. There is a chain reaction that takes place that leads to humans. So what I'm saying is that the understanding of how humans work, operate, function is understood incredibly well. When I read this, it really made me become aware of how much they really know about us, how we operate, what switches to turn on, what switches to turn off, where to tweak here, where to tweak there. So I don't want to, steal your thunder, Sophia. So I know we're going to get into that, but that's what struck me was how fine-tuned this is as far as how it impacts not just the crops and stuff like that, but how it ultimately affects human beings.
Yeah, Mike, I might as well bring in Dr. Huber because he's all over the internet. He's a GMO scientist who has a very, very dense military biological warfare background. He was a specialist in the military in that arena, and he later became a professor of plant pathology at Purdue University in Indiana. And Dr. Huber, Don Huber, is a very straight-laced American man. He is a Mormon. He has 11 children, 40 grandchildren, and he's very conservative and very full of ire at this crazy travesty that the government and industry has perpetrated on humanity in the form of GMOs. And, I don't know if Dr. Huber is positioned in our anti-GMO world to lead it. I did certainly listen to a lot of what he had to say, and you agree with him when you hear it. You sympathize with his rage, but he says things like this, that he's contacted this secretary or that person in this governmental agency or department, and if he can just, write enough letters and write the right letters to the right people, we have time to reverse all this. And I'm thinking, you think you're going to take care of this by writing letters?
That's not going to happen.
No. So how glyphosate, remember, glyphosate is one ingredient in Roundup. And what glyphosate does, it doesn't knock out or kill a plant directly. It acts on something in the plant called the shikimate pathway. And I had heard this in interviews with Dr. Zach Bush, who is the creator of the very fantastic product Restore. So the shikimate, I'll spell it Shikimate, the shikimate pathway is a 7-step organic chemistry process in plants and bacteria that is part of their own immune defense. But by way of this 7-step or 7-enzyme process, they make a trio of amino acids that we, higher life forms, mammals and humans, don't make and desperately depend on. So these are called the aromatic amino acids. And one reason we eat plants and one reason we have such a proliferation of bacteria in our gut is that plants and bacteria they give us, they confer to us through their biology, the trio of amino acids, the aromatic amino acids, called phenylalanine, tryptophan, and tyrosine. And these three amino acids are extremely important to the construction of our neurotransmitters and different metabolic processes in the body. They're called metabolites. Metabolites means they're just a building block of something else. So phenylalanine, that amino acid, now remember, we can't make it. We depend on the obtainment of it through plants and bacteria. It is a pain reliever. It's a precursor, a metabolite of neurotransmitters like adrenaline, which allow our sympathetic nervous system, that's the fight and flight response, to kick in when we are stressed. It is phenylalanine that helps our sympathetic nervous system kick up cardiac output, blood pressure, blood glucose. And without phenylalanine, we don't have the proper physiological stress response. So basically, picture a zombie. Number two, tryptophan. Most people have heard of that. Used to be able to buy that as a supplement, and then there was this big scandal. People got damaged from it. I was L-tryptophan, remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. So tryptophan shows up in all kinds of organs, and that's a precursor to the manufacturing of serotonin, which is a very important neurotransmitter and neurohormone. Tryptophan is one of our big sleep promoters. So without enough tryptophan, we are insomniacs, and also our aggression goes way up. We have bigger appetites, we start craving carbohydrates, and we succumb to depression. Now think about it, Mike. Is that not what we're seeing in our culture?
That's what we're seeing in spades in our culture. Again, when I read the newsletter, Sophia, the side effects or what could happen, what does happen, we see it. We see it all over the place. So autoimmune diseases and stuff like that. It goes back to what I said before, which basically is that they know exactly what they're doing with this. They know exactly what they're doing. And it's interesting, too. This glyphosate, what it's doing, the end result means that they're introducing new pharmaceuticals and drugs into the society in order to combat these disorders or these diseases, right? Or we don't really know what autoimmune really is. We don't really know why it's there and how it happens. Same thing with fibromyalgia as an example. But after reading this, I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't think you guys are telling the truth. I think you know very well how this stuff is happening. And so you're making money on the other end of people suffering. That's another thing, that's really very wicked about this.
You're exactly right. Exactly. We don't know the origin of these modern diseases, but they do know, because this story that we're discussing, you and I, around glyphosate is going to lay a lot of pieces right in place. So the third amino acid of the trio from the shikimate pathway is tyrosine. And that is by itself an antidepressant. And it's also an amino acid that can go through the blood-brain barrier. And it becomes a precursor for the neurotransmitters dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. It's also a precursor for hormones and for a very, very important structural biopolymer called melanin. Melanin is the thing that gives our skin its integrity and shape. So that alone, in the plant world, the shikimate pathway, once it's shut down, the plants can't defend themselves. They need those amino acids to defend themselves, and they become victim to the spread of pathogens in the soil, because with those amino acids, with the shikimate pathway, plants can defend against pathogenic compounds in the soil. But without the shikimate pathway, the soil becomes more toxic, and so does the population of critters in our gut. Because remember, the shikimate pathway keeps our gut healthy, gives us those amino acids that we need, and the bacteria in our gut can keep in check the whole gut biome balance. But without the shikimate pathway, those bacteria start dying and bad pathogenic forms of microbes can multiply.
Well, this would explain clearly why there are so many gut health issues. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, I remember there was a point where all of a sudden they introduced probiotics into the society also. I know probiotics have been around, but it just seems to me, going back maybe a few to several years ago, there was this push to bring an awareness to it, to promote gut health and all of that. So where I'm going with this is that they knew and they know that the glyphosate is destroying the gut. And as you and I have, actually did a whole show on this where we talked about Restore, 70% of your immune system resides in the gut area, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, 70% of the antibodies made by us are manufactured. White blood cells make antibodies, and they are manufactured right in the area of the gut. So the waiting blood vessels on the other side of the gut wall are full of antibody producing white cells. So let me continue and give you part 2 of the glyphosate nightmare. Besides turning off this vital shikimate pathway in the plant world, and I'll just say one more thing. Remember what we said before about how bacteria digest your food in the earlier show? As complex, higher energy demanding forms of life, we outsource certain tasks to other life forms. So we have outsourced the production of those 3 amino acids to the plant world and the bacterial kingdom. But we have a symbiotic dependency on those life forms because we need them for us to thrive. Without them, we don't thrive. So glyphosate, the molecule, is identical to the simplest amino acid of all. Now, what is an amino acid? Amino acid is the building block of protein. When you eat proteins, your body digests them and breaks them. It denatures them into separate amino acids, and they go into something called the amino acid pool in your body. And then we can also make certain amino acids. So amino acids are then encoded. There are codes in your DNA giving instructions to your body to make proteins out of amino acids. And proteins are the workhorses of the body. They do massive repairs, and they're also taxicabs, transport mechanisms. They buffer. Like the protein hemoglobin will carry oxygen. The protein myoglobin will receive oxygen from the hemoglobin at the juncture of cell and blood vessel. And it will take that hemoglobin as a taxicab to the nucleus where, not the hemoglobin, the oxygen to the nucleus, where it can be used in aerobic respiration, the manufacturing of ATP. So glyphosate looks just like an amino acid called glycine. They are almost smack dab identical. One is man-made, one is natural. What is the difference? The difference, it's hard for me to understand, but after over and over trying to get this, I came up with an analogy. Technically, the nitrogen atom in glyphosate has a methylphosphonal group attached to it, stuffed into it. So you could call it an overstuffed nitrogen. But pictorially, picture a very compact, sleek, shiny, wonderful little car straight off the assembly line. That's glycine. Okay? Little compact car. Now picture the same car with one of the doors hanging open, and that door doesn't close. That is glyphosate. Glyphosate is a compact car that you would then try to drive on the freeway and the roads, and this door would be open, and it would swing and hit things and crash and bump and make your car unstable. and swerve and be a danger.
Okay, so it looks identical, but of course the body, in my view, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I read that in your newsletter and I'm thinking, well, the body clearly understands what is real and what is not, what is artificial. So the artificial piece, even though it's very close, the body still sees it as something foreign. Like, what is this and what do I do with this? And I'm assuming, Sophia, that when that happens, like most things that get introduced to the body, into the body that shouldn't be there, the body exerts an enormous amount of energy to try to do something with whatever that foreign substance is. Am I correct?
You're a little off. The body sees glyphosate pervasively roaming through it and takes it to be glycine. The body doesn't react fast enough. It'll grab the thing, because remember I say the body is biochemically blind. It's not used to having to search and cherry pick at stuff. So it sees this little compact car. It doesn't notice that the door is open. And it says, oh, good, this is glycine. I'm going to build a protein with it. So it synthesizes proteins. Building proteins is called protein synthesis. It builds proteins with this messed up molecule that it thinks is the simplest amino acid glycine, but it's not. It's glyphosate. It's something man-made. So now your proteins are doing the same thing that the crappy car with the door open is going to do. Your proteins, they're not properly mobile. They crash and bang and clatter and hit stuff and injure cells because they've got this amino acid in them with a swinging door, right?
Right.
So that is bad. And after a while, the body figures out, well, wait a minute, this protein isn't doing its job well. It's crashing and banging. It won't fit and integrate into the tissues that it's supposed to. It doesn't signal and do the right things for the tissues. And glycine is a component of enzymes too. So the enzymes that it gets into aren't working right. And the body goes, oh, wait a minute. I got to take this thing apart. I've got to rebuild it. The body can actually denature and rebuild proteins, and that's what takes energy. But the fact is that it never can completely deal with glyphosate. And so then it gives up. And glyphosate becomes an agent of the creation of some very toxic compounds. And it really messes up your body. It's very hard to eliminate. It accumulates and it starts weakening you. And remember, it serves as glycine. It's not the real thing. And glycine is a very simple, very abundant amino acid. And I'll give you some examples now. Have you heard of collagen?
Yes.
Okay, collagen is the most common protein in the body. And collagen is loaded with glycine. So easily 1/4 of the amino acid in collagen is glycine. Collagen is very prevalent in your bones and joints. And with glycine not there and glyphosate in your collagen instead, your collagen is not working properly. Your collagen is weak. Your collagen is not holding your bones and joints together properly. Your bones and joints are degenerating, right? You're in pain. You have arthritis. You have rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis. Another one is myosin. Myosin is a key performer in proteins. It actually contracts the muscles. It's the agent that controls muscle contraction, not just in striated or fibrous muscle, but in the smooth muscle tissue as well. So glycine is a key element in myosin. And when myosin is made in the body, the muscle protein, when it's made with glyphosate, you can't contract your muscles. You cannot contract your intestines and push poop through. You can't digest properly because there's no peristalsis. You get what's called paralyzed gut. And your physical muscles, they don't have the strength they used to have. You start degenerating in that regard.
Yeah, so going back to what I said before, Sophia, to make sure I understand it and help the audience, So I had said, it comes into the body and the body doesn't know what to do with it. What you were saying is, no, actually the body assimilates it, believing it to be glycine. And then it's after the fact that the body is trying to figure out, okay, so this is not quite working correctly. And it tries to figure out why. But at that point, it sounds like the damage has already been done. Did I understand that correctly?
The damage has been done. You have a bunch of glyphosate taking the place of glycine in your proteins and enzymes, and a lot of your body functions are just not happening correctly. You're in pain, you are in degeneration, your body is in a horrible, chaotic confusion. This is very, very serious. When you look at, as Stephanie Seneff has, and she is the person from whom I've learned the most about glyphosate. She is at MIT. She's right now studying a lot of metabolic biology. She became interested in glyphosate because she had friends who had an autistic child. And she has now made connections, very important ones, between glyphosate and autism. And she has been looking at the diseases of the modern world that started skyrocketing after the late 90s. So GMO plants and crops were introduced in 1996 to 98. That's when they went nuts, right?
Right.
And glyphosate was used before that as a desiccant, defoliant, and microbial killer in the soil, and a mineral chelator. But it wasn't incorporated into this thing called Roundup, which is now, it's at Home Depot. All your neighbors are using it. Golf courses, Mike. Golf courses are loaded with Roundup and glyphosate. Parks, anywhere where there's a lot of green grass that has to look nice for the public. So, we have also this incredible burst in food allergies. Now, I finally got it after listening to Stephanie Seneff, and you can Google her, Seneff. But here's my tip. She talks very fast. She's a massively informed and brilliant scientist. But you can't understand her. She just goes, so I had to slow the videos down to 0.75. And she does talk like this, but at least I could follow and understand. And then I would sit and write all these notes, and I'd play sections over. So that's how I pieced this together in that very tedious way. But Seneff says that, hey, people don't have food allergies like gluten intolerance. People don't have food allergies because we're allergic to the food. It's because we can't deal with an amino acid in a protein that's in the food, right?
Right.
Being used so widely in the plant world, whether it's as a weed killer or a desiccant to dry the crops, glyphosate gets into the plant proteins. And if those plants and grains like GMO corn, GMO soy that are sprayed with Roundup, if they become livestock food, then the livestock, its proteins glyphosate becomes enfolded into the proteins of cows and pigs and everything that eats this Roundup Ready grain. Glyphosate proliferates through proteins in our world today, and biological life cannot deal with these proteins because the proteins aren't built out of that sleek, correct amino acid, glycine. Instead, they're made out of this unnatural, swinging car door glyphosate that doesn't work.
Yeah, this, as I mentioned, this is not just a mistake. This chain reaction that you're laying out here, Sophia, this is planned. This is planned stuff. It's affecting the plant life. It then makes its way into livestock and, of course, to humans. So it's pervasive. It's full spectrum. And you talked about food allergies and that. And I was thinking, Then we had this proliferation of allergies. I remember growing up as a kid, very few people had allergies. And today, it seems like everybody has an allergy. In fact, when you go to the doctor, one of the things they ask you is, do you have any allergies? What allergies do you have? And then allergy medication went from being prescription to being over the counter. They're trying to cover it up by introducing these drugs and these pharmaceuticals. And I'm going to say that most of the medical community probably is baffled by this. I mean, I'm not saying that doctors know that it's glyphosate, as an example, is the culprit. They only know what it is that they're taught to know, and that's how they diagnose. This is very wicked. It's very, very wicked what they're doing here.
So let me explain the effects of not being able to deal with proteins. So not only are we unable to deal with the proteins that we assemble in our protein synthesis that get into our muscles and our joints and are the rebuilding and transport mechanisms of the body. We can't deal with the proteins that we eat. We cannot fully digest them because they contain this damn thing called glyphosate. So when you have undigested proteins in your digestive tract and it just balks and goes, I can't digest this thing, what does your body do? It opens the gut wall and it pulls in water from the bloodstream because it wants to make diarrhea to flush those bad proteins out. So when your body opens the gut wall, what it's doing is it's producing a different protein called zonulin that is the controller of the tight junctions in the gut wall. People who've listened to the Restore interview we did will remember that the gut wall is a membrane that's one cell layer. That's it, one cell thick. And if you spread it out, it's the size of 2 tennis courts. And each of these cells sits next to the next cell and the next cell and the next cell. And the spaces between the cells are called the tight junctions. These are intelligent joinders between the cells. And they're controlled by a protein called zonulin. So when you get undigested material, an indigestible is the better way to say it, inside your gut, your body says, zonulin, hey, you got to open up the gut wall. I need water. I need to get this stuff out of here. So when that gut wall opens, some of this undigested, indigestible protein goes into the bloodstream. And the job of the Th2 immune system, which is in those white blood cells that make the antibodies, the Th2 immune system goes, what's this? I'm never supposed to see half-baked proteins. I'm supposed to see amino acids. That's it. Now, you've just given me a bunch of half-formed, not taken apart proteins, and it produces antibodies. So that's the autoimmune system kicking in. The autoimmune system is trying to chase down these half-digested, half-assembled proteins, and it begins to go into overdrive, and it makes all kinds of extra cross-protein antibodies. It's covering the whole ball field, right? And that's the origin of all this autoimmune disease we see. It's because we don't digest these glyphosate-containing proteins, and they're getting into the bloodstream, and they're causing not just the digestive disorders, but they're causing the autoimmune things like rheumatoid arthritis, like ALS, MS, the neurological diseases. When they get through the blood-brain barrier, they cause neurological diseases.
Do you think it's contributing to Alzheimer's too?
Yes, Senef says it definitely is. And that's what she's been studying. She's been studying the diseases and ailments that are affecting people today. And I'll go through them again. Food allergies, autoimmune issues, which are also neurological diseases like ALS, MS, Parkinson's. Then we have obesity, liver and kidney failure. We've got the digestive disorders like Crohn's. and we've got the joint degeneration, adrenal failure, chronic fatigue, Alzheimer's, and that's going right up as glyphosate use goes right up. And these are very serious issues, Mike, and the medical world doesn't know what to do with them. Of course, as you say, they are the platform for the invention and creation of tons of new pharmaceuticals.
That's what they're doing. Like, this whole thing is just so stitched together. And once you connect the dots like you have, Sophia, you see that it's a plan. It's a strategy to make people very sick, and along with making them very sick, to make money off of people being sick. And it's funny, you mentioned adrenal failure, and I put a video up today on my blog, 16 signs of adrenal failure, Dr. Mercola. I think it was Dr. Mercola. Very good video. And maybe what I will do is put the link down in the description box so folks can watch that video. It's only about 10 minutes long. And it's interesting. I watched it, and the signs and the symptoms of adrenal failure, so many people are complaining about it. Foggy thoughts, fatigue, anxiousness, depression. I mean, it just goes on. And I'm thinking, wow, like, what's causing this? So, and I, had that video up, and of course I read your newsletter, and I said, well, I think I do know what's causing this, or what's a major variable in what's causing adrenal failure. Anyway, so I babbled on a little bit there. It's just amazing to me.
One of the things that we can look at are clusters of diseases, which Senef has been doing. So in Sri Lanka, they sprayed, not anymore, but they sprayed the rice paddies with glyphosate right before harvest. And the agricultural workers who did this spraying, they were coming down with kidney failure. So the Sri Lankan government put two and two together, and it said, these people are spraying glyphosate, they have kidney failure, let's not do this anymore. And they've banned glyphosate in Sri Lanka now because it is known to destroy kidney tubules. Kidneys, by the way, are very sensitive parts of the body. Now, let's go to Washington State, to a town called Yakima. I think that's how you say it. Glyphosate was used there in 2010 to control the spread of weeds in irrigation ditches. And Mike, they hailed it and embraced it as the lowest toxicity herbicide they could get their hands on. And you know what happened? It's really, really horrifying. They had an epidemic of anencephaly. And I looked at pictures of this, and it is these babies, these fetuses, they don't have a brain. So their skull is a flat top, not at the top where we have the top of our skull, but over their eyebrows. It's like somebody hit their heads with a frying pan, smashed everything. They have no brain, literally. You couldn't say it more simply. And they don't live. They're usually miscarriages. If they do get born and they have the tiniest bit of a brain stem, they only live for a few hours. So anencephaly epidemic in Yakima, Washington in 2010 because they were spraying glyphosate in irrigation ditches to control weeds. Now let's go to Brazil. Remember the microcephaly that we heard about and that was being blamed on the Zika virus?
The small heads.
Yeah. Let's look at glyphosate in Brazil. Forget about Zika.
Yeah. I don't know. This doesn't get any better. It's and the thing is, I don't know how you turn it around, Sophia. And I want to be positive, folks. I really do. I want the glass to be half full. It's just that I don't see any momentum to do anything with this stuff. Yes, as Sophia had mentioned, writing letters to people and stuff like that. But it goes way, way beyond that. A big problem with this that I see is that 99.9% of the population, and that includes people in positions of authority like politicians and so on, they haven't a clue. It's not like they know about this. It's not like they've looked into the research and they know the science. They're not paying any attention to it. None whatsoever. And that is the worst part of it all, is the fact that most people, I don't care who they are or what position they're in, they do not attribute the diseases and the illnesses that you're taking us through here to glyphosate. It's something else. It's something else that's causing people to be obese or to have adrenal failure or to have fatigue and so on. They're not connecting it back to this. And that's the problem that we have, which means that this situation is going to get worse. I mean, I don't know what it's going to lead to in the end. I have to imagine it's going to be a society or a population that is immensely ill.
Mike, let me mention something. What is obesity blamed on? Lack of exercise and junk food, too many carbs, right?
Right.
So glyphosate is widely used on our core crops. So that would be wheat, rice, beans, lentils, sugar cane, sugar beets. It's also used on all the legumes, and lots of cultures depend on beans, right? Corn, canola, soy. So there's this huge, huge array of staple or core crops. And a lot of those are the components of processed foods. So we're told that obesity is the result of people eating processed junk food and not getting exercise. And that's a little bit true, because right there, planted in the processed food, is this glyphosate thing, which is taken to be glycine. And we don't have the shikimate pathway, so our appetite cravings for carbohydrates and sugar go way, way up. But can I give you the good news? I learned this too late for my newsletter, and I really regret that.
Good news would be welcome, yes.
All right, so this is very good news. There is something known to man that can clobber glyphosate down and denature it and turn it into good stuff that the body can use. And that is the molecule called chlorine dioxide, CD. And it is the result of using MMS, Jim Humble's miracle mineral supplement. You've heard of that, right?
Yes, yes.
So MMS is a ratio, a combination of sodium chloride, that's one liquid, it often comes in 2 bottles, and then citric acid. And when you combine these, a gas is released that smells a lot like chlorine bleach, because the end product, the liquid, is chlorine dioxide. And Senef gives a talk. You should really post this talk. I'll send it to you, in which she discusses that chlorine dioxide taken internally will battle glyphosate and actually denature it and turn it into usable compounds, not unusable compounds, which is what all your body can try to do with it, right? So what's the reality, though? The FDA has totally cracked down on MMS. You're not allowed to manufacture it in America. People can buy the separate components and combine them, and I think there are YouTubes on how to do this. I haven't used it myself, but I'll tell you something. It's sold in other countries. It's easy to buy online. It's a little bit unpleasant. I had a couple of bottles of the stuff once, and my friend showed me how to combine it, but it just smelled so much of chlorine gas. Yuck. So I sent it off to somebody else who had a lot of health issues, and he never really got back to me about what he was doing with it. But anyway, so the result of taking chlorine dioxide, MMS, is going to denature glyphosate in the body. And Senef is very, very clear about this. They've used this on autistic children who have autoimmune and gut and digestive problems, and that affects their neurology. And I'm telling you, this is our hope. But how do we use this if the FDA won't let us use it?
Well, that's what they do, right? So this goes back to what we're saying. They have all their bases covered. So this is not happenstance. This is not a mistake. This is not something like, I don't know, we missed that in the lab. This is something that they very clearly understand what it does and what it's doing. And yeah, so banning MMS is the same thing, banning cannabis, right? Anything that's good for us, anything that will help repair the damage that's been done by what they're putting out, they will make it illegal to purchase these products, to grow plants, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I have seen videos on YouTube that have to do with MMS. I'll have to go back to, I think there's a channel I subscribe to, in fact, but I don't remember the name of the channel. I'll have to take a look, and I'll put that in the description box as well.
Yeah, Jim Humble, he was using it in Africa and it worked really, really well against malaria. The people have to understand that the body uses oxidants. Imagine oxidants like hammers and awls in a toolbox, even like cannons. Oxidant molecules are needed to bust up and break things down because they grab at electrons. Sunlight is an oxidant, for God's sake. Oxygen, that's why we call it oxidant, because these things grab at electrons. Chlorine is an oxidant. I mean, when you spill it on your clothes, you get a horrible permanent light-colored stain because it's grabbed at the electrons from the pigment and it's taken the color out. And chlorine will make holes in your clothes and all this stuff. So chlorine, you make hydrochloric acid. It's a very important stomach agent. It hammers and busts up stuff that comes into the stomach. And it's the main twin component in salt, sodium chloride. We need sodium in the bloodstream. We need chloride in the body in order to use it for oxidation purposes. So we need oxidants and we need antioxidants. We need compounds that contribute electrons. One of the best antioxidants we could ever have is grounding. Grounding gives you free electrons, earthing. So if you earth, your balance between oxidants in the body and antioxidants becomes more level. And today we're cut off from the earth, so we spend a lot of time not getting antioxidants in the form of free electrons, and we go into oxidative stress because we have too many oxidants bashing too many things up, right? So there are things called superoxides. This is part of electrochemistry and biochemistry when you start studying what, for instance, radio frequencies do to the cell. Radio frequencies excite the piezoelectric parts of the cell membrane, and the voltage-gated openings open up, and calcium ions, which are positive, flood into the cell by the millions, and they look for electrons. They want electrons, and they start taking electrons. They form these other compounds that are very, very, they destabilize the interior of the cell. And superoxides are one of those compounds. Now, I don't understand this enough. I wish I did. But it's going to take me years of sitting here and slowing down videos and reading obtuse papers about mice and whatnot. And I'm doing my best. So we need oxidants, we need antioxidants. And chlorine dioxide happens to be an oxidant that can take that glyphosate and hammer it down into, I don't even know what, but it can render it usable to the body and basically beneficial.
Well, that's good to know. And people are going to have to use, be a little creative, resourceful in order to be able to obtain MMS as an example, to be able to see if that will help. The one thing, Sofia, too, that I wanted just to talk a little bit about, because I want to make sure that the audience understands that, this is just not gut types of stuff, but that glyphosate has been correlated to, like you mentioned before, neurological diseases like MS, Parkinson's, ALS. I mean, this is very, very serious stuff. So I want to be able to get that out too, to let the audience kind of sit with that there's a neurological aspect of this too, which is extremely damaging to humans. And I know that we talked about this a bit, but in your newsletter, you talk about this thing called AZE, or what do they call it, A's?
Yeah, A's. Let's start with the sugar beet. So Dr. Senef sees that there is a correlation, you can't deny it, between sugar beets and MS all around the world where they grow sugar beets. So in Japan, for instance, you find a high rate of MS, Parkinson's, and ALS. And they're using this glyphosate on sugar beets and sugarcane. And she says all of these diseases are going up exactly with glyphosate usage on core crops. I think glyphosate is going into those proteins and causing those diseases. Then you have, as you mentioned, there's an amino acid. Its nickname is AZE, A-Z-E. It's a azatidine 2 carboxylic acid. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And it's close to another amino acid called proline. And proline binds to glycine receptors. So this thing called AZE that's in sugar beets, it's in very small quantities. It goes to our cells' glycine receptors. And because proline, glycine, and AZE are so close, glyphosate, if it's used on sugar beets, may be sitting where AZE sits. And AZE can be misincorporated into proteins instead of proline. So it's very complicated to follow, but misincorporation of AZE into human proteins, and remember, glyphosate can be misincorporated in the plant where AZE goes. So if AZE is put in human proteins by the unsuspecting body, that can alter collagen, keratin, hemoglobin, and protein folding. Folding means the making of and the use of. So there you go. You've got AZE, proline, glycine. These amino acids are very, very similar. They're like, imagine a color pencil box. Have you seen those beautiful, I used to have them, they came from Switzerland, color pencils, and you have all these shades of blue, and all these shades of green, and all these shades of whatever, other colors. And so the body just says, I need blue, and it grabs one or the other. Body is quickly enfolding, it's quickly encoding, rather, its proteins. Everything happens in the body, it needs instantaneous therapies, right? It's constantly making stuff. So it'll grab a blue pencil, but it's not quite the right shade of blue. Glyphosate is one of the pencils it grabs for its coloring book. And then it realizes too late, hey, this isn't working. I'm getting sick. How can I take this apart? And it can't. That's the tragedy.
Yep. And that's what I was saying before. After I understood you better, it's one of these things where the body takes it in, thinking it's the right thing to take in, and by the time it realizes that something is wrong, it's too late. So, I don't know. I just wish that this could be more positive. But on the other hand, this is a very good show because it's opening up the aperture to what glyphosate really is. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, folks, but it's also driving the point home that this has to be planned. This has to be something where it's very, very understood. The domino effect or the cascade effect of how this impacts, like I said before, plant life, livestock, humans, leading to illness. Sophia, it reminds me, I know you and I talked a little bit about this before the show. We go back to the Georgia Guidestones, and it has that number, manage humanity down to a number of 500,000. That's the number, right, on the Georgia Guidestones? Sure seems to me like this is part of that plan to manage it down.
Let me backtrack a little bit. I'm going to read from a Sierra Club publication from 2016 titled Unintended Consequences of Using Glyphosate. The widespread and massive application of glyphosate herbicides has resulted in extensive contamination of the environment. A comprehensive 2014 study by USGS scientists on water systems, including rivers, lakes, streams, ponds, wetlands, precipitation, soil and sediment, soil water, ditches, drains, and groundwater. So this 2014 study was conducted over 9 years, 38 states, found glyphosate in 39.4%, almost 40% of samples, and its principal metabolite, aminomethylphosphonic acid, in 55% of samples. 70% of rain samples tested positive for glyphosate. Independent studies show that commercial glyphosate herbicide formulations, which contain extra added ingredients called adjuvants, are actually even more toxic than glyphosate alone. Besides being a broad-spectrum systemic patented herbicide, glyphosate is also a patented mineral chelator, antibiotic, and desiccant. It disrupts plants' metabolic shikimate pathway, which starves plants of essential nutrients and weakens their immune systems. Moreover, glyphosate's desiccating effects reduce a plant's ability to uptake water. It essentially gives the plants a condition similar to AIDS. So we got plant AIDS. So now the plants have their own AIDS and they have an immune deficiency. That's what this is saying. And life forms, the trophic chain, eat plants. So those drawbacks get transferred up the food chain. We eat those life forms and the plants. And so we start concentrating, remember that? Concentrating in our tissues the net effect of this plant AIDS that travels up the entire food column. So now I look at the trees in California that I thought were dying from drought and the uptake of the nasty, metallic salts, barium, strontium, titanium oxides from the chemtrails. And I am thinking, well, wait a minute. They don't have a shikimate pathway, these trees. Maybe that's why they're going downhill like this. And this brings me to the world of licensed replacement plants.
Yes, where they're going to make it all pretty again, but it's going to be proprietary.
Right. So what I learned from Dr. Seneff, I wrote her a question because I couldn't find the answer online, and she was kind enough to answer. I asked her, do Roundup Ready crops, do they have a working shikimate pathway? And this was her reply to me by email. These plants already have a version of the shikimate pathway in their genome. What is added is a second EPSP synthase gene from the bacterium. That's the GMO insertion. And what I'm going to pause and add in here is that there is a form of bacteria known to man that were smart enough to mutate. And what that bacteria did was it converted the spot for glycine into a spot for another amino acid, alanine. And that gave it the way to sidestep glyphosate. So it became glyphosate immune because it did this mutation on its own. So that's what science has done now. In the Roundup Ready crops, it's copied the same thing. The GMO insertion of this synthase gene at residue 96 gets rid of glycine, the glycine spot, and you can't put glyphosate in there. So if you change the code, the DNA code for glycine into a code for alanine, it will give you immunity to glyphosate. So that's what's in the Roundup Ready crops. There is a GMO gene insertion that tells the DNA of the crop, don't look for glycine, and it won't grab glyphosate either. Just use alanine.
Yeah, no, I understand what it's saying. So it goes back again. I'd said that they understand how all of this wiring works. The switches, that's what I said before, the switches. And what connects to what to substitute to make whatever it is, the organism, plant, the animal, whatever, to assimilate or not assimilate. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that their understanding of how all this works is so intricate that it's scary. It really is. It's very scary.
Yeah, Mike, and they're going to market this GMO gene insertion the way they market the flu shot. Run for your flu shots. Every November, December, we hear this. And they're going to tell us, look, yeah, we have this problem worldwide. And they won't blame it on themselves. They'll blame it on something else. The way they tell us the flu virus has become resistant, it's mutated, and there's all these variants. So they'll say, look, glyphosate is everywhere, but we can save you from it because we now have synthase genes. These are modified genetic codes that can be put in your body, and they will help you bypass glycine, and they'll, be different in different proteins. Residue 96, residue 108, residue whatever. And people will say, yeah, give it to me. Then I won't get joint degeneration. I won't have autoimmune diseases. I'll be fine. I'm going to be immune to glyphosate. So this is how we'll become the Franken beings ourselves. And we'll scream and yell and be desperate for this gene insertion because we'll be seeing how this stuff has ravaged all of our, everybody around us.
Well, if they turn around and say, by doing this, we will do away with fibromyalgia, we'll do away with rheumatoid arthritis, we'll do away with, some of the other stuff that we talked about, obesity. And correct me if I'm on the wrong track here, Sophia, but, if they market it that way, they're going to, they could say, you know what? We use this stuff and we really didn't realize what the side effects were, even though they did. And then they're going to market, like you said, get this vaccine. And as soon as they do this, in my mind, they're just going to say, we're going to eradicate all of these diseases and these illnesses. And there's a lot of people suffering from this stuff. There's people walking around debilitated by rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, they're going to jump at this stuff.
Mike, you're exactly right. In fact, I'm going to revise what I just said. I don't think they're ever going to point to glyphosate because the public is never going to understand that. They're just going to tell us that they have IgT. That is the immunoprophylaxis, I think that's what it's called, by gene transfer. They're going to give us IgT solutions to these diseases that are rampant. They're going to say, okay, we can prevent obesity. Imagine that. We can prevent arthritis. We can prevent Alzheimer's. And they're going to give us this gene insertion. And then people will be absolutely thrilled. This will be the scientific solution to the modern scourges. I doubt they'll even say it was their fault with glyphosate.
Yeah, you're right. I'm wrong. They won't admit to it. They're just going to come out with this scientific breakthrough. Science, medical science, we've come out with this. And of course, there are so many people suffering from all the things that we've mentioned. I mean, I know so many people within my own circle of family and friends that are suffering from these things. And if tomorrow somebody came out and said, you won't have to suffer anymore, they're going to be like, sign me up. It's so unfortunate that it has gotten to this point. It's very sick. It's a sick way of thinking and operating. I don't know. I did want to ask you though, we talked a lot about Restore. So, and I know this is not medical advice, and I'm asking you for your opinion. Can Restore help with this in any way? Does it offset any of this?
The way I look at it, I was thinking about this the other day, so it's good that you asked. I've been trying to figure it out. Restore prompts the gut wall to tighten instead of opening up when these indigestible proteins are flooding through the gut. So Restore is actually preventing those indigestible proteins from entering your bloodstream and worsening the autoimmune conditions that you might have or might not have. But Restore keeps that gut wall intelligent and tight, and that enables your body to pack this indigestible protein, glyphosate-containing compounds, into feces and eliminate. But here's what Senef said. She said this so fast, I barely understood it, and then I had to think about it, as I always do. She said, maybe that's not as good as the MMS, or the chlorine dioxide, that clobbers the glyphosate into usable, good pieces. Because if you poop out complete glyphosate, right, not denatured glyphosate, because the body can't denature it, then it's in the sewage, it goes into the ocean, it goes back into the world.
Yeah, you just kind of redirected it.
Right. You've gotten rid of it, but where else is it going to go? And I remember her saying that, how do we know where it's going to go? It might be better to break it down once it enters us. But once again, if it's not easy to get MMS in America, so A lot of people may not try it, and who's ever even going to hear about it?
Well, that's the thing. Most people have no idea. No, they have no idea about most things. So when you get down to something like that, forget about it. I mean, it's a minuscule piece of the population. There's another part of your newsletter toward the end that talks about glyphosate in vaccines.
Right. And I had heard Stephanie Seneff say that her theory is that the root cause of autism is glyphosate. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what about vaccinating children and all of this? Well, I've now learned that there are many, many things that create you could call it a recipe for disaster in certain children, and they will have an elevated risk of developing autism. But one of the things she said in this talk she gave for Autism One, that's, I guess, a media group or something. She's given a lot of talks for Autism One, Dr. Seneff. She said, I suspect some of the vaccines are contaminated with glyphosate because the vaccine cultures are grown on gelatin derived from the cartilage of pigs. The pigs are fed a heavy dose of GMO Roundup Ready corn and soy. There's no doubt the pigs are being exposed to lots of glyphosate, and the gelatin comes from collagen, and collagen is loaded with glycine. So this is how the vaccines get packed with glyphosate. And remember that vaccines are delivered by an old English term, which is still used in medicine, called effraction. That is burglary. Vaccines are burglars because they break into your body. They don't go the kosher, proper way, which is through your mouth. Proteins are supposed to enter your body through your mouth and get disassembled in your digestive tract. And vaccines are injected. That's effraction, burglary, right into the bloodstream, into your arm or leg or butt or wherever it is. And so these are proteins that contain glyphosate, remember, because she told us where the cultures are grown is loaded with gelatin, which has glyphosate. So these proteins in the vaccines are going into your bloodstream in whole form, not denatured, and they contain glyphosate. So this is how vaccines, in a roundabout way, put you on track for autism.
I mean, this is new information as far as I'm concerned. I've never read anything about vaccines, and I've read a lot of stuff on vaccines where they talk about glyphosate being part of the mix. So this is something that is needs to be stared at and understood, because it makes perfect sense as to how it would get into the vaccines. So it has to be there, in my view.
Right. And then in turn, autistic children, you really will appreciate how enormously brain-like the gut is the longer you look at it. The gut is a fantastic little universe in and of itself. And it's extremely sensitive and intelligent. And I think this is where people get this expression, I had a gut feeling. It's almost as though they thought something through, not through their conscious processes, but through their gut process, right? And so the gut and the brain are like twins in the body. And when the gut is harmed, then there's a connection between gut and brain. And the brain becomes harmed as well. And this is, I think, what she's saying about autism, because autistic children have massive, massive gut problems. And get this, I just learned that children who are delivered by cesarean section, which is becoming increasingly popular because the OBGYNs want to go golfing. They don't want to sit up all night with a mother in labor. So they'll induce labor through Pitocin, or they will simply do a cesarean because it's neat and quick, and they make more money that way and waste less time. So one way that a child develops its first breath of biome is passing through the vaginal canal, the birth canal, into the world. And that's where it gets its biota from its mother, from her actual tissues. That's where it gets the first dose of biome. And what does a cesarean child get? As Dr. Bush said, it's lifted out of the stomach. It gets the hospital biome. And then these poor babies, these preemies who lie in a crib in the hospital and they get hardly any human contact. Where is the biome? Right? They have to get human biome in order to develop their own. And that elevates the risk of autism by like something like 30%. Cesarean babies have a 30% higher risk of autism.
I did not know that. That's a new statistic for me. So 30% more if it's C-section.
Yeah, that's what I just passed that on to Janice Barcelo, actually. I didn't know this. But, you know, that's the beauty of it. There's so much interconnection. And the more you study, the more it interconnects. And it becomes very difficult to keep track of it all. I keep track of it all in my mind. And I'm terrified that I'm going to start having loose threads and they're going to waft off somewhere. And then I'm going to lose knowledge. Because where am I going to write all this down apart from a newsletter?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, you've documented it this way because you will forget things. I mean, I read a lot of stuff. I research a lot of stuff. And, you know, if I don't document it in some way, you forget it, you know, and then you might run into it again at some point like, oh, yeah. I remember looking at that or watching something about that a couple of years ago or maybe even a month ago. There's just so much out there, Sofia, as you know. We can't retain everything, you know, so documenting it with your newsletters is excellent. This is a great newsletter. I highly recommend people read it and take it in because it really does open up a can of worms that most people in the alternative research community, in the science community, they don't know anything about this. You know, they're chasing rabbits down rabbit holes. And I know before I kind of jumped ahead because I was just thinking about the Georgia Guidestones and stuff like that. But, you know, then I was thinking, is it that or as far as reducing the population, or do you think it's part of the transhuman agenda, or do you think it's like a mix of both?
You know, you could be right, Mike, that it's a mix of both, because let's think this through. So what is the number on the gorgeous Guidestones? That's what I called it in a radio show yesterday. I'm so embarrassed. Oh, the gorgeous Guidestones. Oh, is it five? I thought it was 500,000.
I think it is 500,000, yeah.
But then my host said it was 500 million.
Let me take a look. Hold on one second. Well, let me see.
Google gorgeous Guidestones.
I'll get the Illuminati homepage.
Handbook.
Okay. Let me see. It is it's 500 million.
We were wrong. Yeah, 500 million. So 500 million, right?
Right.
So the culling, as I've said many, many times before, the culling has got to do with the challenges, the reduction of life expectancy, the degeneration, the succumbing, the lack of fortification of the plant world. They don't have the shikimate pathway, the bacterial world. This is the ground level of the Earth's trophic chain, bacteria. They're also the decomposers. Remember, they're at the very top and they take all the huge life forms and break them down. So if we don't have bacteria to do that, what is going to happen to us? We're not going to have that complete trophic chain, that turnover of life. The assaults are going to take us out very, very incrementally, but very methodically. And whoever remains is going to have enough prevalence in terms of their genetic codes to withstand the transhuman doctoring, because that's what's going to happen. They're going to offer us IGT to cure rheumatoid arthritis and the degenerative diseases and the autoimmune diseases and obesity and all the stuff that's killing us right now and causing so much disablement and so much pain and suffering. So I think that it's a little of both, because what is gene transfer but transhumanism, right? So they'll appeal to us on that level.
Yeah, I mean, they're just screwing with nature is what they're doing. And, you know, there is this transhuman aspect of it, because if they're going to insert genes or adjust or tweak genes or DNA, whatever it is that they're going to do, I mean, this is, This is playing around with nature. And then, with the depopulation, I've always said, with the people, the controllers, time is on their side. I mean, they don't really focus very much on time, in my view. I mean, they know that it's generation after generation after generation. And so, they will continue to go about it until they get to where they think they need to be. In the meantime, as they do that, they're also going to make money because of the way they think, which is very warped, off of people being sick. And then I was reading something the other day where they're just saying that the birth rates in Western society is just it's declining and declining and declining. So at some point, in my view, we're going to hit that point where it's going to go in the direction in which they're pushing it, which is depopulation and also the transhuman piece of it.
Yeah, I had posted on my blog a map and a story about declining birth rates. And one of the top producers of babies right now is Mali. African countries are the only place where the birth rates are up. Everywhere else, it's falling.
Yeah, yeah. And in the United States, we have all the baby boomers now have reached an age where, their runway is kind of short. And again, with the birth rates declining, the current generation or future generations, you can see how they're shrinking it down slowly but surely. They're just reducing it and diminishing it until they get to the point, like I said, where they're going to be convinced that they're going to achieve their objectives. So anyway, Sophia, this was a fantastic newsletter. It really is. The magnitude of the research that you've put into it, and then again, I always say this, the dot connecting is extraordinary. So you did a great job.
Well, you're very kind, Mike, and I was stressing through this one. I was working really hard to try to put things together in what people could understand, and I hope we've done that on this show. But I want to throw in one more little peppy thing, which is free, and it works like a charm. And if you're feeling bummed out because of glyphosate, at least try this. Tilt your bed. So I've told you, Mike, but you're too lazy. You haven't done it yet. Now you're going to do it today because I've shamed you.
Tilt your bed like an Egyptian.
Yeah. So somebody Skyped me a few weeks ago and he said, this is all the rage. Veritas Mel, he did an interview with Andrew Fletcher, who's a British engineer. And Dr. Mercola had actually gotten a hold of this information in February and written a newsletter. And for some reason, I didn't read that newsletter. Actually, I skipped quite a few of his newsletters, I have to say, because they come every day and they're very dense. But anyway, so Andrew Fletcher from Britain went to visit the tombs of the pharaohs. And he saw that the beds are all raised. These pharaohs were sleeping on a slant of 15 centimeters at the head of the bed. So he started studying the, what should we call it? The hydraulics, I guess, of sap and water exchange in trees. And then he studied the human circulatory system. And he decided that it is very beneficial to tilt your bed. Now, this is not jacking up half your bed to sit and watch television. Mattresses let you do. It's not that. You actually have to go and get something. I use books from the garage, and I even by people from the 9/11 movement whose books I'm not interested in anymore. They're in my garage in a box, and I'm going to give them away.
What books would they be?
Stop it. So anyway, I got those books out, and I did feel a little bit of I guess you could say dismay as I'm putting certain of these books underneath my bed to prop it up. But they worked, and I raised my bed on the head end only. So you take the two corners of the bed, and you build that up by, you've got to do a minimum of 5 inches. 5 to 7 inches is what's recommended. And you leave the foot of the bed, you leave those feet down on the floor. So your whole bed is slanted. And this was very, very discomforting visually. I looked at my bed and I thought, oh my God, it looks terrible. It looks like it's on a ship. tilting. But I slept in it that night and I was blown away. I woke up loose, limber, happy. I was ready to run a marathon. That's how I felt. I could do anything. And I had to take a couple of books out and lower it because it was too confusing to look at during the day. And I got it down the following night to 4.5 inches. And I stayed there for a few days, but it was nothing like the 6.5 inches I started at. That was like a little girl wearing her mommy's high heels. And life was very exciting at 6.5 inches. But what I've noticed now, I went and got wood, and I have the wood cut up into blocks, and now I'm using wood, and I have it at, I think it's 5.5 inches, and I'm going to add another 1/2 inch. But I believe that, first of all, for physiologic, musculoskeletal realignment, it's fantastic. That just being at that slight downward slope, your ligaments get pulled during the night, and everything aligns and stretches out, and you get very good blood flow. If you're lying flat, your blood is going to pool in your thighs and your butt during the night. So if you're just at a slight angle or slope, your blood is going to be delivered all the way to your toes, and that's going to kick off the hydraulics of venous return. It's very important. And then, now, if you look at Andrew Fletcher's website, inclinedbedtherapy.com, you will see testimonials and stories. I mean, there's some paralyzed man who was able to stand up and walk again. It apparently remedies things like varicose veins that women spend so much money trying to correct. And it's helped with all kinds of cardiac issues. Stroke victims get tremendous benefit from it. Psoriasis, migraines. There's a very long list. There are a lot of testimonials there. So I think people should try it.
Now, do you slide down the bed, though?
I think that depends on two things: how soft and squishy your mattress is, and your own body weight. Because I am of very light body weight. I'm like a pebble, and my mattress was very hard. I just got a new mattress. I really needed to get one, so this inspired me to get a new mattress. But my old mattress was hard, and I was like a pebble, and so I slid down, and I had to scramble up several times during the night. And now this new mattress doesn't cause me to slide as much. And I think I gained a couple of pounds.
Okay, I promise you that I will do that. In fact, I'll do it tonight. I'll go into the garage. I have blocks of wood, 2x4s or 2x6, and I will cut it and fit it under the posts at the head of the bed and lift it up, and I will check it out.
You should, Mike. I'm telling you, I've tried to get so many people to do it. David Weiss was the one who told me, and all of his friends have done it, and they're all raving about it. But I must have different kind of friends, because none of my friends have done it. No, one has. And she has serious health issues. And she said, guess what she said? She said she has not had a dream in years, but she put her bed up just 3 inches, and she started to have amazing dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why it was done back in the ancient civilizations. We tend to just chalk that stuff up as weird and stuff like that, but so there's rhyme and reason as to why they did what they did. I promise you, tonight, I will do it tonight. And I will get back to you within a few days, a week, or whatever, and I'll report back as to whether I have seen any improvement.
Definitely, Mike. I think that the pillow is the last thing we have left of the raised bed, because the pillow raises your head somewhat. And Andrew Fletcher says that animals, whenever and wherever possible, like grazing animals, they'll always sleep on a slope.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Okay.
And I think maybe it has to do with water, because animals don't go where it's flat so much. They might, how you see goats on slopes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll do that. Is there anything else with your store as an example that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I would ask people, those of you who haven't tried Restore, It's in my store, Avatar Products. And I give, just so people know, I give a free pump that's a $5 value with the sale of Restore Now. And cell phone cases. Oh my gosh, I have a whole variety of cell phone cases that I've been making, but they're not pictured on the site. So what was the point of bringing that up? I'm just very excited. I'm just sewing all kinds of new fabrics together while I listen to the Sage of Quay podcasts.
Oh, there's nothing better.
No, but people should get cell phone cases. Definitely. They're very cute. I'm looking at a bunch of them now. And what else? I don't know. I have a soap line possibly coming in, but it isn't here yet. My store is just kind of in the doldrums right now, but oh, I have magnesium cream in jars, finally. Jars, not the squirt top 8-ounce. You can scoop it out. It's much easier to get at and handle. And as usual, tons of iodine. Always, you remember you were mentioning how we were talking about how they regulated MMS, it regulated it out of the country. They've regulated iodine the same way, Mike. The DEA only permits a 2.2% iodine concentration and used to be able to get Lugol's formula at 15% in any drugstore, and you can't do it. Iodine is another thing that really helps. And I'll mention that the nascent iodine I have, I don't know if I've said this on one of your shows before, but I have two kinds. I have one kind for $20, which is a great deal. It's a very good form of iodine, very easy to take. You can take it right off the palm of your hand. But the other iodine I found out from one of the chemists in the lab there, magnesium iodine, that actually has an unpaired electron. It's given a treatment with current to give it this unpaired electron that makes it very, very bioavailable. And that's the most concise explanation I can give. I don't have time or energy after all this glyphosate talk to tell you why an unpaired electron is exciting for your body, but your body can grab that iodine right away and do stuff with it that the other nascent iodine takes a little longer to do. So that's why that iodine is more expensive. I didn't know. I knew it was treated, but I didn't know why. So it's more expensive than the other kind. You could try it out yourselves. Magnesium iodine, avatarproducts.com.
Okay, and your store is never in the doldrums. There are always great products there, and I have to order some nascent iodine from you. Is there anything else, Sophia, or do you think that we should wrap up?
I think we should wrap up because I'm getting hot in here. We have a heat wave, as usual. Oh, I want to say something to people about these heat waves. What are they thinking? They'll post on the weather that it's 75, but feels like 85.
Yep.
Sorry, it's 85. Just tell us the truth. They have started this feels like bullshit.
Yeah, we have the same thing. I've been pointing that out for a while. Like today, they're saying it's going to be 90 or 91 today, but it feels like 100. I'm like, well, where did the 9 degrees come from? So they'll say, well, it's the humidity and all that stuff. I don't know. It seems to me it is much hotter, but they don't want to tell you it's much hotter for whatever reasons. We can go into the whole geoengineering thing, but we won't go there because we don't have time. So I personally believe, Sophia, they are purposely understating the temperature and then giving you this feels like stuff. I agree 100%. I think it's nonsense.
It could be because there's so much reflective material and conductive material in the air.
Yep.
That it gives the air actually more density. And I'll just say this. I know we're going on for a while, but I've always been fascinated as to why pool water at 75 is so cold you can barely swim laps in it. I mean, it's freezing. And then you go in the ocean at 75 and it's amazing. It's like the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So what's the reason, Mike? An engineer explained it to me, and he didn't even swim. He was some guy from India, and he said, oh, that's very simple. And he told me it's because ocean water has more particulate and particles and density. It has minerals, it has sediment, it has salt, it's cloudier, and therefore it is more like a solid than fresh water. So it's a better conductor with all that conductive material in it. So ocean water at, 83 is like you can't swim in it. You would just have to loll around and
It's
bathe
like
in it.
bathtub water. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But pool water at 83 is very comfortable for a lot of people. You can relax and you can really pull and swim. So it's because the cleaner the water, the more devoid it is of content, especially conductive stuff, it'll feel colder. So maybe that's what's happening in the air. But regardless, the understatement is to get us used to these crazy temperatures.
I agree, Sophia. It's been very hot here in North Carolina. They'll say the feels like temperatures. We had a stretch there where for about a week or so, 10 days, it was 100, 101, 103. I mean, this is hot. I mean, you can't go outside. I mean, you can go outside for a little bit to go do something, that you have to do, but sitting outside and trying to enjoy yourself, forget it. Too hot.
Right, and exercising outside, there's no way you can do that.
Then you get this stupid analysis from the utility company, from Duke Energy, telling you how much above a energy efficient home you are as far as your energy usage. First of all, the energy efficient home doesn't even exist. That's something they make up, they pull out of their ass. And I mean, you have to cool your house. It's 103 degrees outside. So oh my God, this world that we live in drives me crazy.
Don't go crazy yet, Mike. Just go to your editing software and prepare our show.
I will. It's going to be a good show. And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.